I'm Matt Strite from the Red Cloud location.
I'm Levi Pumphrey from the Shoals Creek location.
And we have one other, Everett Van Shoals. He's here somewhere, but he'll be helping us with this, talking around the drill. The first thing that we're going to go over is how to set it up in the monitor. And then we'll work the hydraulic and electrical connections that we'll have to have. And then we'll just work around the drill, go through the meters. Basically, the first thing that you want to do when you get ready to set up your drill is you'll have to come into letter H on your monitor, and you'll go into there, and there's a couple things that you'll want to do when you get in here as far as the setup tab, which is the first tab on the left. You'll want to go through there and make sure your row width is right, which is 7.5 on the screen here. 7.5 or 10, whatever you have on your drill. And it'll tell you how many row units you have based off of that right there. One thing that we ran into, a guy had a single rank machine yesterday. I don't know if you guys have any of them, but the only time that you'll ever check mark that is if your machine only has the front rank. That's it. Otherwise, if you check that, it'll mess up all your offsets in your setup. So the single rank, you can lock up, you can lock up the front rank, but you can never lock up the back rank, and that's because it's got the drive wheel on this drill. That should do it on that page. You can run your clutches too. Select them on and off to check them to make sure they're working okay. Or you can turn one on or one off of this screen. You can also do it on your console, but you can shut them off on here. If you go to the population, that page, basically you'll want to set your seats per acre, and this is where you will set your alarms. How high or low that before you want that to come on to tell you that you've got an issue. And then you'll check your ground speed source too. Whether you've got using ground speed, radar, or GPS. You can put a manual speed in there, but the population's not going to be correct because you're going to put in a set speed, which is not going to be accurate. But if your radar fails, you can get by with that. I think Levi, go to G. There we go. The other thing, when you set up your drill in the display, you'll want to come in here. If you've locked up any of your front rank, you'll want to go in here and change this to every row on, or every row, even rows on or odd rows on. And that's how you set up your blockage sensors. And on the blockage sensor, if you go back and you've got a row that keeps giving you a warning, you can actually go in here, as long as you know it's planning, you can go in here and shut off that row if you're tired of hearing it until you can get a new sensor or get it fixed. Most people set this as far as the blockage. If the alarm keeps going off, you can actually change this 2 seats per second, and you can go to 10 or 20, which causes it not to alarm quite as fast. Let's see here. One other thing that we want to go through is the module setup. On this drill, we have modules across the drill, and they're these little boxes, and they'll start left to right, and all these modules, these boxes will have a serial number on them, which has to be set in the monitor, and it's got a little wizard here. So if you ever have a problem, like say you've got a couple rows on one of the modules that aren't working, you can actually switch the module in here, but you have to move the serial number with it. So if you switch 1 through 12 and you put it on the 5th module, you'll have to change them to in here so that it affects. That's the easy way to diagnose if you're having a problem, whether it's the seed sensor or whether it's the module itself. We have had some of them get some moisture in them, and then that'll cause them to fail. So let's go. go to J, to the book with the wrench. Yeah. This page, it's pretty important. You can kind of tell if you're having an issue with your drill and you think if it's kind of skipping or if it's alarming, you can go in here and check and make sure you're keeping your wheel speed, your GPS speed, and make sure your implement switch, you know, if you're going through the field and that starts bouncing, it'll kick the recording on. So you can check that here on this page. And that's what we usually check if we have a problem with the drill is we'll go to this page and just kind of see what it's doing. I think that's about the system readings.
If you go back to your blockage there, Levi, if you look at this drill, if you look at your tag on your blockage filter, your front rank is always all even rows. Your rear rank is always all odd. So if you're going to switch and go to soybeans and use this front rank, then you would jump on in there where it says every row on, and there you go. You would just turn your even rows on. So
Front's even, you said?
front's even, back's odd.
Yeah, because the farthest one left would be the odd one, right? Yeah. It starts
One
back.
is on the back rank.
Yeah.
But then I get a lot of calls as well on this flow rate here. And when you're going through the field, if these are dancing, flickering from red to green, and just like Christmas lights, that's a good indication that your flow rate's off. You just need to bump that up a little bit. So that's a common deal there.
Yeah, and then the rates, you'll have to adjust the rates on your, I wish we had that frame control off. We don't have it. But the box in the cab, it'll have the right, left clutch and the rate. That's how you change the rate. You just watch it on your screen, on your main screen, and see what it goes up to. You can also control your right and left clutch up there, and you can scan the roads, and you can switch it to, if you switch that double arrow. Yeah, you can planner at a glance. Basically, it looks pretty much like your planner that way. Or you can scan a row if you're having an issue and kind of see whether the population is off that much, and you can go back and check your sensor.
So on that population too, guys, if you're doing soybeans, it's accurate because this is KS per acre, so 1,000 seeds per acre. So that's accurate on soybeans. If you drill wheat with one of these, you can just max that out. It's not gonna count high enough to be real accurate on that. So on wheat or product like that, you're really just using it as a blockage sensor is what you're doing. But soybeans, it's accurate on counting. So.
We just go through the meters over here. One thing that I kind of wanted to go over quick, as far as tractor compatibility, a lot of guys are asking what's required to pull these drills because they're pretty heavy. There's a chart, and it basically a 30-footer, what they're telling you is you're looking at pretty much a 200 horse tractor to run that one. And then the 40-footers, 260. And the hydraulics, there's really not much hydraulic to run on this besides the CCO. You can get by. We've got guys running a 4960 on a 30-footer. It's just not real great in the hills. Yes, we should try to go over the meters while we're here. The meters in these things are a pain to change because they're up underneath that tank and you can't hardly crawl in there to get to them. So what we have is we have a lot of guys that'll buy 2 sets. That way if they go from soybeans to sorghum, they don't have to change. They'll just pull the whole unit out and then just put another unit back in it, which I think for the money and the time that it takes, it would probably pay for itself. On the meters, you'll have three different wheels. And the three different wheels are this white one, which is high rate soybeans, higher rate wheat. And then there's a black one, which is, it's a medium rate. It'll be the same width. It'll be for wheat, sorghum, and that kind of crops, seed size. And then there's a narrow one. And the narrow one, these are 32, and the narrow one will be 16. It'll just be half that, and it'll have a lot more little bumps on it for the lower rate. It'd be more for alfalfa, real small seed, I suppose. And then you also got the gates. These gates will be full open for high flow, soybeans, probably wheat, and then you'll close them down as your seed, the seed size gets smaller, or you're running a lower rate, the lower rate wheels. One thing Everett pointed out, but while we're on the meter, is when you tighten these up, when you change these wheels, make sure you don't over tighten these bolts. I don't know if everybody can see that. These bolts right here, if you do, it'll bind on that plastic bushing. So that's one thing to watch on that. And let's see what else was on there.
Yeah. So if you do change your meter, it's a good idea. Just walk, and when Matt walks you around the back, just either you go to the back or have somebody go to the back and give that ground wheel a spin and make sure it's nice and smooth. You don't want it jerking. You get out in the field, you'll start shearing cotter pins or whatever. So, give that a turn while you're sitting there in the farmyard and make sure everything's operating smoothly.
We've had them bind up, and then what happens is it'll shear that shear pin off on the back if that gets too tight. So you can kind of see it better here. It's just a plastic bushing, but if you put enough pressure on it, it can bind up.
On these gates, we've had it too where guys will get to fighting as you're going through the field. Maybe your gates are like this one's pretty loose. It'll vibrate down and shut that row off. If you look around on this one, there's like a little needle on this side and an adjustment, so maybe it came loose or something. So slide that gate up, make sure this is tight. That shouldn't slide up and down. It should be kind of hard to pull up and down. So if you got one that's sliding real easy, pull that meter out and adjust that on the back.
That's pretty much.
You have to pull the whole meter assembly out to do that, or
Yeah, and the 30 footers are a lot more difficult than the 40 footers. The 40 footers are a little bit higher up, but yeah, you kind of got to find a small person or something to get in there because it's tight. That's why they came out with this one. As far as the meters, if there's no other questions, that's pretty much covers them. While we're here, I think we just will go over this part. We'll go around the drill, but I'll go over this quick and then we'll maybe touch on it again. But on this disc, the easy way to tell if this disc is wore out is to measure from the hub to the outside, and the absolute minimum is 5 1/4, which I guess we've kind of discussed it, and the new one starts at 18. By the time that bevel is wore off your disc, it's about wore out, especially in no-till conditions. But the absolute minimum that John Deere recommends is 16, which gives you that 5 1/4 between the hub and the outside of the disc. It's just an easier way to check that. That should be about it up here. I'll walk through it and go over that. hydraulic connections. We're going to walk around the drill and kind of show you how to connect it, and then Levi's going to go over some wear parts, some adjustments. These drills are fairly simple. They don't have a lot of connections on them. The only thing you have to remember is when you plug in your pressure, the downforce, you have to keep it in constant, so you'll want it in the right SEV coupler, so that way you can push it forward and down on end of float when you shut it off. The first hose that should be connected before you do anything is the case drain. That's that flat face one that pops out of there all the time. That protects your motor, and then you'll have to run it in constant to hold your downforce down and also keep your CCS fan running. The CCS fan, you're going to run that at about 30 for pretty much every crop, unless you run a single rank machine, and then you'll run it around 23 to 25. It'll just be less just because of the less amount of hoses. I guess we'll walk over here and we'll show you how to adjust your downforce. Do that with this knob. And what you'll do is you'll turn that knob, back this lock off, and turn it in or out until you get the correct downforce. The easiest way to do that, actually the only way to do it correctly, you can't really go by the gauge from what we've had experience with, because of the different ground soil types and compaction, and whether you're doing no-till or worked ground. But you're going to mostly run it in the orange. But the only real way to tell is to, when you take this thing and put it down into the ground and drive forward 50 or so feet and check that this rock shaft is horizontal with the frame. That's the only real way of knowing that you got the proper downforce on the machine. So as long as them are both running horizontal, you'll be fine. You've got it set right.
While we're up here, I want to touch on, I like checking these bolts right here in the frame, the bolts in the front and the back. They have a tendency to break, especially if you're running terraces or rough conditions. Another thing while I'm up here, on the casters up here, they recommend there's 2 grease certs on each one. They recommend 50 hours greasing those. Also, your wheel bearings, thing a lot of people neglect. You need to check those annually, and they recommend 150 hours to grease them. Also, depending on tire size, tire pressure, a lot of people don't check tire pressure. You need to make sure everything's correct there. Had a few issues with wheel bolts coming loose on some of them. So they recommend to check every year on them, and they're 130 foot-pounds on the wheel bolts. And I think we'll come around over here to the row units. There's a lot of people, so hopefully we'll fit over here. We'll go over a row unit over here. On this machine, this has the Pro Series row units. Older machines will have the 90 series. Big advantage is a couple big advantages, and we got a display over there that shows the differences in the Pro Series and the 90 series. But the Pro Series row unit, they only have 1 grease cert, is one of the major advantages, and that's on your depth arm here. And they recommend annually 10 pumps of grease, and don't use a clay-based grease. They recommend the John Deere ST Polyurea grease on that. And I like people to grease it at the end of the year before they put it away. seemed like we had a lot less problems with them. And when you grease it, you want to run that through the full range of motion. On a 90 series unit, you'll have 3 grease zerks. You'll have one on your closing wheel, one on your press wheel pivot, and then of course the same one on the depth arm. You want to grease your closing wheel every 50 hours. You want to grease that. Press wheel is an annual greaser too. 10 pumps might be a little excessive, but just make sure it gets greased and you can move it up and down. When I first start and checking one out, I'll take the row unit with it up and I'll see how much side-to-side play I got. And if you're starting to get a lot of side-to-side movement, you want to take in the pins and bushings up here will start going out, and you want to get that taken care of. Another thing, I've seen the closing wheel arms bent before, so you want to make sure that, and I've also seen the bolt for the closing wheel be bent, so it don't spin like it's supposed to, and sometimes they don't spin at all. But you want to check your bearings on your closing wheel, on your press wheel, and on your gauge wheel and your opener. You want to make sure everything spins freely and is good there. You don't got a lot of play. You need to check and make sure there's also in the bushings in your closing wheel and your press wheel. You want to check for side-to-side play in them too. When they start getting excessive, that can make improper seed placement and all that. But they have, some of the older 90 series didn't have seals in there. And you can put seals in them if they didn't have. They make a tool that'll drive the bushing in deeper. And then you can take this washer and so you can drive your seal in. And if you want the number on that, it's a JDG 10959. And you can order that through your dealer. And he touched on your opener, and new one's 18 inches, replace at 16. You want to check your seed boot. Your seed boot, they say a maximum of a 1/2 inch wear off the bottom. And if you have, they're kind of hard to measure with them in there, but from top to bottom, their minimum is 11.3 inches. And make sure everything on the Pro Series, they changed how the boot mounts a little bit. Instead of using the bolt, they have a pin that has a flag and then bolts to the row unit. And they seem to last a lot longer. And on the 90s with the bolt, they had a standard bolt in them, and if the bolt starts wearing, you can put a metric bolt in and get a little bit of that play out of there, and maybe get another year or so out of them, another season. You need to check your tire condition on your gauge wheel. Make sure there's a lip on there. That lip helps clean the blade off, especially if you're in wetter soil conditions. And also with that, the clearance between your gauge wheel and your opener should be about 1/8 of an inch is what we recommend. The Pro Series, this one has the spoke gauge wheels on it. They're a lot better in wetter conditions, and they help clean out trash a lot better, and you can get them for the older, if your machine doesn't have them on there. It's an option. And check your springs on your press wheel and closing wheel. I've seen them break. And also there's where you got 3 settings on them to change your pressure, and that's all dependent on. Oh yeah. Also on the boot, there's a spring, a little leaf spring in there, and they can break. And that keeps your boot up against your opener, and you want that. It's kind of important. You want that in there. You want to check that. With that, I think, and he was talking about if you lock up your front row, there's on your splitter here, there's a tab you can pull out, and that's how you would shut that row off. so the seat doesn't go to the opener there. We'll come around and talk about the transmission a little bit here. So on your transmission, you want to check that annually, and the fill plug just right up here. Depending on serial number, early ones will be 15, 40 engine oil, and later will be high guard. You want to run your adjustment here, you want to run that all the way through and lubricate that with something, keep that from binding up and locking up. That can cause issues. Also check this is where your cotter pin is for your shear, for your meter drive. You want to make sure that is there and in good condition. There's extras here. It's good to have a few extras. And on your drive wheel down here, tire pressure on that is 36 psi. You want to make sure that's good. Check all your chains on your meter drives. And that. Is there any questions on anything I may have missed or concerns? Got anything to add, Everett?
Yeah, high-low sprocket for high-low range is right up here. On this transmission, it's not uncommon from last season to this season to have rust underneath that. So just like Levi said, just all I do is pull down on this and just run it all the way up and down a couple times. I don't recommend greasing it because then you're just gonna get a bunch of dirt on that and then it's just gonna bind up.
So you could use the dry lube or something.
Yep. If you do, I would use a dry lubricant that doesn't attract dirt. A couple other things that are wear items that sometimes we forget about is your hoses. So if you do a lot of soybeans and you've got a few years on a drill, right here, that seed's blowing through there and it's hitting this side, so this side of this hose is going to get thinner. You can push on them, it'll collapse, replace it. Those shouldn't collapse. One thing too, if you do have to replace a hose, make sure you have the rank lowered and you've given yourself a lot of slack, or if you just bought a brand new drill, check that. Sometimes they'll be a little short, it'll pull off. Always, it never fails. It's always in the center where you can't see it. I don't know why, but that's where it's gonna pop off. And then tie wraps, they get aged and brittle. Make sure your hoses are tied up. There's nothing worse than folding and on our rest rack, pinching an air hose or some harnesses there. So make sure those are tied up, out of the way. And then randomly go through and check, because these springs in field conditions, these springs will bounce around and you'll have closing wheels and set off from each other. So just, do a visual walk around, inspect that. Let's see, there's one other thing I was gonna have you check. Oh, and then just a rule of thumb, bottom mark is a 1/2 inch depth, and at each adjustment's a 1/4 inch from there. So if you're wanting to, just preset, remember that. So it's a 1/4 inch each notch. Underneath, you've got these tubes. You can probably see them better over here. Right here, you got one on each side. That's your tank clean out. So if you go to change meters or anything, maybe some buckets, get under there, clean them out. As well as, here's your tank clutches, left and right. One thing, you can look over it on these. We get a lot of calls if you do cover crops or want to drill something that's lighter. We do have some issues with bridging in the bottom of this tank. So if you look in here, there's an agitator shaft that runs through the bottom, and it's only got roll pins about that long. So There is an agitator kit that you can buy. It's a little more aggressive to put in there. We've come up with some different ideas here and there on, you know, putting things on that shaft that are a little longer to keep that. But just if you're going to go with a lighter product that maybe bridges, just be aware of that with one of these. So they do. You want to tell them about scales? They do offer that.
They offer scales, which most of our guys are putting on, just so that you don't have to do the bag check. But you'll have to, if you want to do a test to figure out how much rate that you're putting on, you'll have to shut off all of the other rows and leave one row undone. And you'll have to hang a bag on the hose and drive 400 feet. And then there is in your book, there's a formula to accurately, you know, adjust your rate on your screen. But if you have a scale, it's a lot simpler to do that, and you can check it periodically and tell if anything's changing. The only other thing that I know that we need to tell, we've had most people when they come in here, I talked about raising and lowering the front or the front gang if you lock it up to do 15-inch, or, you know, if you lock it up, if you only want to do like 15-inch, if you got a 7.5-inch drill. But what you'll have to do in your guidance, and I can show you on this simulator over here, you'll have to put an offset in there, or your guidance line's not going to be correct. And Everett, there's really no set offset that works perfect.
No.
You'll just have to start.
You would think if you had a 15-inch drill and you were locking a rank up 7.5, you'd think that would be your offset. 2.5 works real well. Why, I don't know. So that's a good starting spot. So just be aware. Dwayne just reminded me one thing. We told the group, if you're new to one of these, I recommend getting a tarp. I'm from down in Kansas, so we just use a company, Colby Canvas. They already have the pre-measurements for these. I think there's a guy in Franklin that makes them different places around. But get you a tarp that fits down over that, because even a heavy dew in the morning, it's going to run right around the front of this tank, and you'll see rubber flaps here in the front. All those are for is to keep chunks of dirt and rocks from flipping up in those meters going down the road. It doesn't keep moisture. So you get caught in a rainstorm or a heavy dew that runs around the front, hits some soybeans. We all know what happens when soybeans get wet. We can't get back to the field for a few days. Wheat, you know, it'll get down those cups, it'll sprout. I will caution you, just stop right there. If you do run into that, shut your meter gates, pull your meters, clean them out, and go. If you try blowing those chunks through your hoses, you're going to have a bad day, I guarantee it. You're going to fight it the rest of the day. So just pull your meters, clean everything out, and then go. But just be aware of that one issue with them.
Now, does anybody have any questions? We can go over on the monitor how to put that setup in if you want. Otherwise, if you've got questions, now's the time to catch one of us. Help you out with it.
Really? I wonder if it didn't lose it going down the road. They do make, I mean, just to visit with you guys a little bit, they do make, you guys have probably seen them, they make augers that you can attach to the back, swing out to fill on this. If you do have scales, anytime you add an attachment like that, you're going to have to re-zero that thing out because it's hanging on that frame. So just be aware of that change.
Surefire Ag makes a really good starter fertilizer system for these two, and I'm sure there's some other ones out there as well. We've had really good luck with them. And we recommend the 360 yield tanks that mount on your tractor. They're narrow transport tanks. You can see around them. They don't stick out wider than the tractor, but they make a good setup if you're wanting to do starter fertilizer also. And then, do you have something on the parts?
Yeah, the only thing I've got is if you guys have the older drills that have the 90 series openers, Deere's come out with a retrofit kit to retrofit them to this Pro Series. It comes with, you know, the spiked wheel and the new press wheel, disc, spring. There's two different kits. One has 8 rows, one does 2 rows. I don't know why they did it that way, but they're running a special on them, $25 off per row on them through like the end of April. So if you got a drill that needs some updating or needs new discs or whatever, now would be the time to get it set to this new Pro Series. So go to your local dealer, and they're like $475. Like $475 does 2 rows. So anyway, that's all I had.
I wanted to touch on, I didn't touch on it earlier, but the seed tab or seed deflector underneath comes off your boot. That's underneath your press wheel. Those are pretty common to wear on, especially the 90 series. They're cheap. They need replaced. If they're missing, replace them. If they're worn badly, you want to replace them. The Pro Series, they changed the design of that tab, and they also changed material, and they have a lot better wear, and they go down the trench better. Along with the Pro Series press wheel, instead of just having the rubber tire on the outside, the whole wheel's rubber, other than the hub, and they fit down in the trench a lot better than the previous on the 90 series. So
That display over there's got the new style wheel on there. You can grab it and physically bend that new Pro wheel. It's considerably different than the other one. And the tabs they're a lot more flexible, and they've got a little notch out in them. A lot better tab than the old white one that come out originally with them.
They slimmed up the seed boot too on the Pro Series. They're a little narrower, and they go down the ground better, and I think they last a little bit longer that way too. So that. Are there any questions anybody's got?
One thing to mention too, I guess, on emergence and everything, if you're in no-till, we don't fight it, but if you do switch and you got a conventional tilled field, you might have to slow down just a hair if you're using both ranks. It has a tendency to move a little more dirt, and it'll cover up that rank, and you'll notice a little bit of an emergence difference between that front and rear rank. So just be aware if you switch to a tilled field, you might have to slow down a mile an hour or so.